When I bought the house on Maplewood Crescent, I thought I'd finally won. Not the lottery. Not life in general. Just the quiet, middle-class American dream. A modest two-story home, a patch of green lawn, and the sacred promise that no one would bother me as long as I paid my taxes and mowed once a week. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was assuming the Homeowners Association was just a boring group of retirees arguing about mailbox colors. Maplewood Crescent HOA was not boring. My lawn wasn't special. It wasn't golf course perfect or Instagram worthy. It was just grass, healthy, green, and mine. That detail matters.
Mine.
The first time someone cut across it, I assumed it was an accident. A jogger taking a corner too sharply. No big deal. Grass grows back. The second time, I noticed a pattern. A diagonal trail from the sidewalk to the next street. Like a shortcut had been voted into existence without my consent. By the third time, the grass had begun to flatten permanently, forming what could only be. That's when I installed the little sign. Freshly seeded, it was polite, civil, neighborly. The sign lasted 12 hours. I found it the next morning snapped in half, lying face down like a crime scene victim. Her real name was Deborah. No one called her that. She was the HOA president, self-appointed moral compass of Maplewood Crescent, and the proud owner of a pearl-white Cadillac Escalade that looked like it had never known dust, rain, or humility. She knocked on my door on a Tuesday at 7:14 a.m. Not rang.
Knocked. Sharp. Precise.
Like a judge's gavel. I opened the door, half asleep. She smiled the way people do when they've already decided you're wrong.
Good morning, she said. I'm Karen.
HOA president. Of course you are. I wanted to talk to you about your lawn. My lawn. She explained, very patiently, that residents had complained about my unwelcoming signage and that the shortcut across my property was a long-standing community habit. A habit, like smoking or lying. I told her calmly that it was my property and I didn't want people walking across it. Her smile tightened. Well, she said, when you live in an HOA, you agree to be part of a community. I nodded. She leaned in slightly. And communities make sacrifices. 2 days later, I received my first notice. Grass height inconsistent with community standards. My lawn was exactly the same height it had always been. I mowed it anyway. The next week, unauthorized lawn sign. The sign was gone. The violations kept coming. Mailbox alignment. Trash convisibility. Aggressive landscaping. Meanwhile, the shortcut grew wider. Children. Dog walkers. Karen herself, heels clicking as she crossed my lawn every morning like it was a public park. One day, I watched from my window as she stopped in the middle of my yard to take a phone call. She gestured with her hand, standing on my grass, laughing. Something inside me shifted. I tried everything reasonable. I sent emails. Polite ones. Calm ones. Carefully worded ones. No response. I attended an HOA meeting. That was a mistake. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, which smelled like old coffee and unchecked authority. Karen sat at the head of the table like a monarch. When it was my turn to speak, I explained the issue. The lawn. The shortcut. The damage. She nodded sympathetically. Then she said, "Have you considered being more flexible?" Another board member suggested installing community stepping stones. On my lawn.
Paid for by me.
The motion passed unanimously. I laughed. They fined me for disruptive behavior. I applied for permission to install a small decorative fence. The request was denied. Reason given: fencing may create a visual barrier that discourages community interaction. I installed flower beds instead. They were trampled within a week. I planted shrubs. They were mysteriously trimmed to death. Each morning, I woke up to new footprints, new damage, new proof that my property was apparently a suggestion, not a boundary. And every time, Karen's Escalade was parked nearby, spotless and smug. The final straw came on a Sunday afternoon. I was reseeding the damaged area, kneeling in the dirt, hands muddy, trying, still, to fix what others refused to respect. Karen crossed the lawn. She didn't even look at me. I stood up. Please, I said. Just go around. She stopped.
Turned.
Looked me up and down. This is a shared neighborhood, she said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. I pay for this lawn, I replied. She smiled. And I pay HOA dues. Then she stepped deliberately onto the freshly seeded patch and walked away. Something snapped. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet, irreversible click in my mind. I looked at the ruined grass. Then at the retreating Escalade. And for the first time, I stopped thinking about rules. I started thinking about statements. After that Sunday, I stopped trying to fix the lawn. Fixing implied hope. Hope implied cooperation. Maplewood Crescent had made it clear. Cooperation was a one-way street paved straight through my property. So instead, I started watching. Like clockwork, the parade began. Dog walkers first. Always distracted, always letting their leashes stretch just far enough that their dogs treated my grass like a buffet. Then the joggers, earbuds in, eyes forward, feet pounding the same diagonal line like it had been etched into the earth. Then Karen. She came last every weekday, stepping off the sidewalk with surgical precision. Not a foot out of place. Not a glance in my direction. It was intentional. I started keeping notes. Not names, patterns.
Time. Direction.
Frequency. Not because I planned anything. Because when someone keeps telling you that what you're seeing isn't happening, the only defense left is evidence. The violations escalated. Now, they were creative. Grass discoloration inconsistent with seasonal expectations, failure to maintain uniform lawn density uniform. On a lawn being trampled daily. I appealed. They denied. I asked for mediation. They scheduled it during working hours, then fined me for not attending. Karen sent a cheerful follow-up email reminding me that positivity improves property values. I decided to speak the HOA's language. If they loved rules so much, I'd give them compliance. I edged the lawn obsessively. Sharp enough to make the sidewalk look sloppy by comparison. I watered only at approved times.
Documented it.
I measured grass height with a ruler. I trimmed hedges to exact HOA specifications. And every time someone stepped on the grass, the contrast made it worse. The damage was undeniable. The path now looked like a scar. Neighbors noticed. Karen noticed too. She didn't say anything. She just smiled more. The next HOA meeting was packed. People whispered when I walked in. Karen opened with a smile and a gavel tap. We're here to discuss several ongoing concerns, she said, eyes locking onto mine, including hostile landscaping practices. Hostile. I stood up when given the floor. I didn't yell. I didn't rant. I showed photos. Week by week. Same path. Same damage. Same trespassers. I showed copies of violations.
Dates.
Contradictions. The room got quiet. Someone in the back muttered, "That does look bad." Karen cleared her throat. The board has determined, she said, that the path in question constitutes an informal pedestrian easement. I blinked. You can't just decide that, I said. She smiled. We just did. Vote called.
Passed.
Just like that, my lawn was no longer fully mine. The next day, people walked across my lawn with confidence. Some even nodded at me. One man said, HOA says it's okay now. Like that settled it. Someone dragged a stroller across the grass. Another let their kid ride a scooter over it. The lawn wasn't a lawn anymore. It was infrastructure. I stood on my porch and felt something new, not anger.
Clarity.
Karen's Escalade became a symbol. She always parked it perfectly, nose just short of the sidewalk, polished to a mirror shine. It sat there like a monument to authority. Rules for you. Immunity for me. One afternoon, a delivery truck clipped her trash can. She was outside instantly, phone raised, voice sharp. HOA violations were issued within hours. When a neighbor accidentally parked 6 inches over a driveway line, Karen had it towed. But when her guests blocked fire lanes, misunderstanding. Not everyone agreed with her. A retired couple slipped a note into my mailbox. We're sorry. This isn't right. A teenager stopped cutting across the lawn and started going around. But most people took the easy route. They always do. And every shortcut taken made the line in the grass deeper.
Permanent.
One evening, after another fine arrived, this one for failure to embrace community solutions, I sat on my porch long after dark. The lawn lay quiet, moonlight catching the flattened path. I realized something important. This wasn't about grass. It was about control. Karen didn't want a shortcut. She wanted submission. And the HOA didn't want harmony. They wanted an example. I stood up, brushed dirt from my jeans, and looked once more at the lawn. Then at Karen's driveway. An idea formed. Not violent. Not immediate. Just inevitable. Something symbolic. Something unforgettable. Something no HOA rulebook could quietly bury. Once the HOA declared my lawn an informal pedestrian easement, everything changed. Not legally. Psychologically. People no longer hesitated. They didn't speed up or look guilty. They walked straight across, confident, entitled, sometimes chatting as if they were on a park trail. One woman even stopped to tie her shoe. On my grass. I stepped outside and cleared my throat. She looked up and said, "Oh, relax, the HOA approved it." Approved what? Theft? Trespass? Karen had turned my property into a lesson. Resistance is pointless. The citations increased again, now weekly. Failure to maintain pedestrian-safe turf conditions, they were fining me because people were damaging my lawn. It was almost impressive. I appealed again, attaching photos, logs, timestamps. Karen responded personally for the first time. If maintaining the lawn is stressful, perhaps you should reconsider homeownership in a shared community. It wasn't advice. It was a threat. Without warning, orange flags appeared in my yard. Survey markers. I confronted a contractor who was measuring the path. He shrugged. HOA job. They're talking about reinforcing the walkway. Gravel maybe.
Gravel.
On my lawn. Paid for by HOA fees, I also paid. I went straight to Karen's house. She answered the door, already smiling. "Isn't this exciting?" she said. "We're turning a problem into a feature." "You don't have permission," I said. She tilted her head. "We voted. That's not how property works." She leaned against the doorframe, perfectly calm. "Then sue us." The next HOA meeting was standing room only. People sensed blood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. I simply asked one question. "If the HOA can take my lawn today," I said, "whose property is next?" Silence. Karen answered quickly.
Too quickly.
"We're not taking anything. We're optimizing shared resources." A man stood up. "So can people walk across my flower beds?" Karen froze. "That's different."
How?
"It just is." The room shifted. For the first time, Karen wasn't smiling. The next day, I received a certified letter. The HOA was initiating proceedings to place a lien on my home for unpaid fines. Fines I was actively disputing. That was the moment something inside me hardened. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to exhaust me. Some neighbors stopped making eye contact. Others whispered support, but stayed silent publicly. Fear works. A few doubled down, cutting across the lawn more aggressively, as if daring me to object. Karen walked across it twice a day now.
Slowly.
Deliberately. Sometimes she glanced at my windows to see if I was watching. I always was. One afternoon I noticed something strange. Karen had started parking her Escalade closer to the edge of her driveway, almost as if she wanted it seen. A message. Power displays always need symbols. Her house. Her car. My lawn. A triangle of dominance. I laughed out loud for the first time in weeks. She thought I was trapped in HOA paperwork. She thought I was small. She had no idea how much attention pressure creates. That night, I walked the length of the path. It wasn't grass anymore. It was dirt.
Art paquet, permanent.
I stood there and understood something very clearly. If I let this stand, it would never stop. Not here. Not anywhere else in my life. This wasn't about winning. It was about ending something. ending the idea that rules only flow downward. I didn't plan violence. Karen's Escalade sat under the streetlight, gleaming. Untouchable. I smiled. Nothing ever is. Tea was a Thursday. Perfect weather. Blue sky. The kind of morning real estate agents love. I woke up early, made coffee, and stood by the window like I always did. People crossed the lawn. Of course they did. A jogger. A woman with a dog. 2 kids cutting to school. Then Karen. She crossed slowly, phone in hand, heels pressing into what used to be grass. She didn't look at my house. She didn't have to. By now, Maplewood Crescent was tense. People felt it. Even if they couldn't explain it, something was wrong. Too many meetings. Too many letters. Too many whispered conversations. When control gets this tight, the smallest disruption feels dangerous. No one knew what form it would take. Only that it was coming. Later that afternoon, Karen's Escalade sat where it always did.
Clean. Perfect.
Untouchable. Sunlight reflected off it so sharply it hurt to look at. Neighbors walked past it carefully. Kids were told not to play near it. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a warning. What happened next would later be described using careful language. Words like unexpected, unfortunate, highly irregular. No one would describe it as intentional. Not officially. There was a loud sound. Not explosive. Not sharp. Just final. People turned. Someone screamed. Someone else said, "Oh my God." When the dust settled, Karen's Escalade was no longer perfect. It wasn't drivable. It wasn't symbolic anymore. It was just a very expensive object that had lost its authority. Karen arrived seconds later. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. Not angry. Not powerful. Just stunned. Neighbors gathered. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "How did this even happen?" Someone else said, "I told her this was getting out of hand." Karen rounded on me. "You," she said, voice shaking. "This is your fault." I didn't argue. I didn't smile. I just looked at the lawn. The path was still there. Trampled.
Scarred. Permanent.
And for the first time, everyone saw it. Not as convenience. Not as habit. But as evidence. Evidence that something had been taken too far. Karen tried to speak like she always did. Firm, authoritative. But something had broken. Not the car. The spell. She wasn't the voice of order anymore. She was just another angry homeowner standing next to a ruin symbol. Later, people would argue about blame. Some would say it was an accident. Others would say it was bound to happen. No one would say it came out of nowhere. Because it didn't. It came from letters. From fines. From footprints in a lawn that belonged to someone else. From power exercised without restraint. That night, Maplewood Crescent was quiet. No one crossed the lawn. Not once.
People walked around it. Carefully.
Respectfully. As if they'd suddenly remembered something important. Karen's driveway was empty. The Escalade was gone. And with it, something else. The HOA sent an email within 48 hours. It was short. Carefully worded. An unfortunate incident occurred involving private property. The HOA reminds all residents to remain respectful while investigations are ongoing.
No apology.
No acknowledgement of the lawn. Just damage control. Karen didn't sign it. That alone said everything. Karen stopped appearing in public. Her curtains stayed drawn. The Escalade didn't come back. Rumors filled the gap. Insurance disputes. Internal HOA arguments. Lawyers telling her to stop talking. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with a clipboard had vanished overnight. Power doesn't like scrutiny. Emergency meetings were called. Closed-door meetings. People started asking questions they'd never dared to ask before. Why were fines issued so aggressively? Why was private property redefined without legal authority? Why was one person allowed to act without oversight? The board splintered. 2 members resigned. Another stopped showing up. Suddenly, community harmony mattered again. One morning, I woke up and noticed something strange.
No footprints.
None. The path sat untouched, exposed for what it was. A scar. By the end of the week, the HOA quietly removed the orange flags.
No announcement. No explanation.
The informal pedestrian easement was never mentioned again. They didn't reverse it. They pretended it had never existed. Letters arrived. From lawyers. From insurance companies. From the HOA's own legal counsel. Everything slowed down. When authority loses confidence, it hides behind paperwork. The lien proceedings?
Dropped.
The fines? Under review. The board suddenly wanted mediation. I declined. I'd already said everything that needed to be said. Weeks later, Karen showed up at a meeting. Different posture. Different tone.
No smile.
She spoke briefly about personal matters and resigned.
No applause. No argument.
Just quiet. The kind of quiet that means people finally see you clearly. She left without looking at anyone. The HOA didn't dissolve. It didn't become perfect. But it became cautious. Rules were clarified. Appeals were honored. Fines required multiple approvals. Power gained friction. And that matters. Grass is resilient. Given time, sunlight, and respect, it returns. The path faded. Not completely, but enough. Enough to remind anyone who noticed that something had once been wrong here, and that it had been corrected. New residents hear the story in fragments. Oh yeah, that house? There was an HOA thing. Don't mess with property rights. The details blur. The lesson doesn't. I never wanted revenge. I wanted boundaries. And when those were ignored long enough, the neighborhood learned something important. You can trample a person quietly for a long time. But eventually something breaks. And when it does, no amount of rules can put it back the way it was.